Hello, my beautiful blossoms, blooms, and buds. Welcome. Ooh, I kind of look a little scruffy tonight. Sorry. Yeah, welcome to our sixth Golden Terrace Volume 2 stream. Um, and it's also the final stream of the main storyline. Next Tuesday, we will do the extras. But yeah, welcome. It's exciting. This went really fast. We've been kind of trucking through these books. And I'm going to look right now. Some of you have responded to the poll, and it looks like the Imperial Uncle is winning right now. So we will probably be reading Imperial Uncle next book. But yeah, welcome. I'm Rosebud Reads, and welcome to my book garden. Actually, welcome to my basement, but it's got books, it's got me, and it's got Don May. So I feel like it's a pretty good time. So in regards to Golden Terrace, I do not own anything other than the physical copy in front of me and my time. So please don't come at me for copyright. I'm doing this simply for the joy of it. And hello, Chi Chi Kiki. Welcome. How are you today? I know I'm doing pretty good, even though I look like I got dragged around a little bit. My hair's not cooperating tonight. Oh, hi, Mo Mars Rover. How you doing tonight? And I'm glad you're doing good, Chi Chi Kiki. I am super excited for my convention tomorrow. I literally just finished painting my nails, so if I'm like gently turning pages and all that and look very awkward, that's probably why. I got the fast dry ones, but you know they're never quite fast dry ones. So I'll be doing like little dinosaur fingers. But yeah, so this is our last live stream of the main story, and then we just have the extras, which we'll do on Tuesday, and that's kind of exciting. Like, almost feels a little abrupt, not gonna lie, because we're almost seemingly starting up on like a new battle, new war. So I'm kind of wondering if it's going to be summarized quickly. Okay. Okay. Momar's Rover says, pretty good. Excited the weekend is almost here. College finals are really beating me. Yeah, I remember finals. They were pretty rough, but you can do it. You got this. Sending you good energy and concentration. Oh, you got this. And I hope that this will be kind of little. Alexei, sorry, it was bouncing off one of the plastic standees, and it looked like it was on fire. So I was like, oh my gosh, is my room about to catch on fire? But no, you got this. You can do it. But anyway, let's see. So last time we had Fu Shen about to head out to battle, but events proceeded as they had foreseen. Not long after, Emperor Chang Shi introduced the subject of punitive expedition against Shinan in Yanning Hall. Oh yeah, I'm glad that this is the perfect break from studying and that you're excited to find out what the boys are up to. So I hope it's going to be a good time then. Okay, so last time, I'm just going to read like the last little excerpt because it was a little summary. And apart from the northern frontier armies, which still stood on Fu Shen's side, the other 40-some assembly members, including Yan Xiaohan, agreed to His Majesty's proposal. After this event, there was an extra layer of meaning in the gazes people leveled at them. During the northern campaign, the Baiyuan army and the Tianfu army had still presentably marched together. But hardly any time had passed, and now the undercurrent of disagreement between the two of them had been brought to the forefront. The nation was easily charged, but characters was hard to alter. A sycophant was always unreliable. In the spring of the following year, the Duke of Jing, Fu Shen, led an army of 100,000 south under orders to carry out a punitive expedition against Commandery Prince Siping, Duan Gaohong. This time, it wasn't his former subordinates in the Baiyuan cavalry who went on campaign with him, but a strengthened army of the court. Its main force was composed of the Jiangnan army that Xiao Shichen had led while retaking the Central Plains. Once again, they were upon Golden Terrace in the capital's outskirts, banners flapping, war horses neighing. Emperor Chang Shi in person left the city to see off the army, just as Emperor Yun Tai had once led the civil and military officials to send off the teenage general on his way north to resist the enemy. They seemed full of magnificent sentiments and lofty aspirations, but in reality, they were only coldly looking on. Yan Shaohan stood not far from Emperor Chang Shi. His eyes swept over the various high ministers and at last settled on Emperor Chang Shi's slightly plump figure. Oh my gosh, my nose is so itchy, I'm sorry. Yan Shaohan had no expression. His face looked cold and indifferent, but this instead made him seem more real than the ruler and his ministers, with their faces full of feigned emotion. From a distance, Fu Shen looked up and sent a glance his way. Their eyes met in midair. Yan Shaohan nodded gently. He dimly felt that under his hard helmet, that person seemed to be smiling. They're so sweet. The night before his departure, Yan Shaohan had said to Fu Shen, "All you need to worry about is going south. I'm here to guard the rear for you. There's nothing for you to worry about." Fu Shen hadn't said anything at the time, only smiled and lifted his chin to kiss him. He seemed completely ignorant, yet also to see the truth clearly. A spring breeze swept over the countryside. Yan Shaohan watched the commander's flag gradually recede into the distance. In his mind, he silently completed the words he had left unfinished the night before. "When you come back, I will give you back a clean court." Oh, he's going to clean house for his hubby/wife. Right, hang on. My hair is bugging me. Hopefully I didn't just mess up my... Nah, we're good. That'll do for now. All right. And so it begins. No. This is why you don't paint your nails before doing something. I thought reading a book would be fine. Chapter 75. The height of summer was passing, the sweltering heat gradually dissipating. It made ready for Emperor Chengshi's trip to Jiangnan in the 9th month. Yan Shaohan was dispatched to go on ahead to Jinling and make all the arrangements for the temporary imperial residence, its guards, and so on. The day before leaving, when he had finished handing over assignments to Wei Shushou and other such people, he had returned home and was walking down the corridor watching the servants rushing in and out to pack up his luggage. Empty-handed and utterly bored, he toyed with a snow-white hydrangea next to him. The setting sun on the horizon was spilling golden light all over the ground. Lord Yen sighed into the wind. He thought that if he went on like this, he would start spouting lines of poetry like, "The setting sun shines with longing on the river's flow." It was already 2 months and more since Fu Shen had gone on campaign to Shinan. Yan Shaohan wasn't concerned about his safety. He only missed him to distraction. Separation was long, yearning was a torment. He had already tasted enough of it in Jinling, and now he had to taste it anew. It was only because his patience was good and his reason still present that he could still have a thought for Emperor Chengxi. Otherwise, he would long ago have thrown it all over and gone in search of his husband. Master! The butler trotted over from the other side of the courtyard, holding a thin letter, which he offered up with both hands. He said, Master, an army messenger just came to deliver a letter. He says it's the Lord Duke's personal letter brought back from Shinan. Yan Xiaohan's hands gave a fierce shake. A portion of the hydrangea was immediately plucked bald. White blossoms fell over the ground. His ears were filled with his own pulse. He forced a calm expression onto his face and said, Let me see it. The envelope itself was very thin and tightly sealed. There was only one transparently thin piece of writing paper tucked inside. When Yan Xiaohan pulled it out, he was afraid of using too much force in tearing it. Why was it only one sheet? That four-word note reading, Is my wife well, was still branded heavily on his heart. During this separation of vast distances, what would he have written? When he had unfolded the letter paper that had been folded twice, Yan Xiaohan went completely rigid in the posture of holding up the letter. What the hell was this? There were no words, only an illegible scrawl of a pitch-black inkblot. Yan Xiaohan stared at it for ages before finally exercising his impoverished imagination, and he caught up with Fu Shen's bold and unrestrained style. The black was back, the white was belly. Sticking out in front of it was a mouth, stuck up behind was a paw, and the strokes on top escaping at a slant were wings? No, that was wrong. What creature had 4 wings? Fu Shen was, at any rate, a son of nobility. While his drawing and calligraphy skills weren't fit to be handed down through the ages, at least it was always clear what he was drawing. What was going on with this scribble that could have been stuck up as an exorcism talisman? Ooh, you know it's bad at that point. Yan Xiaohan hadn't realized at all that his own appearance, caught between laughter and tears, gritting his teeth, might be even more frightening in the eyes of others than the drawing. It was like a small child whose attention had been caught by a new toy, all his mind bent on seeking an answer. He hadn't remotely considered the possibility that this drawing had just been casually scrawled without any meaning. That would be great. Yeah, it's been like two and more months. I haven't seen you, and I'm just gonna throw you a doodle. Like, just 'cause. Love you! Of course, Fu Shen wouldn't have sent a letter all this way to make fun of him, but this drawing was truly exhausting his efforts. Yan Xiaohan spent ages trying to decipher it. He looked at it right side up and upside down. Finally, he realized that his earlier judgment had been wrong. Sticking out at the front wasn't a mouth, it was 2 birds' heads, and what was stuck out behind wasn't a paw, it was a tail. The 4 lines of ink were 2 pairs of wings. Adding in the black backs and the white bellies, the answer at last began to come clear. The drawing on the paper was a pair of wild geese. Oh my god, these gays. Oh, are you kidding me? Like, my standards are, like, up here right now. Like, this is ridiculous. The moment he understood, the look in his eyes abruptly softened, as if something had launched a sudden attack on his heart. The corners of his lips turned slightly upward, but there seemed to be tears welling up in his eyes. The letter had been sent back along with the military reports. Because there was a danger of it being opened by someone else, Fu Shen couldn't express his feelings straight out, so he'd used this means of sending him a goose letter. The meaning of the goose was a tacit understanding that would make sense only to the 2 of them. The goose was a loyal bird. It mated for life and flew to the ends of the earth with its partner. That night, while Yan Xiaohan couldn't sleep from the agitation of the letter home, was kept up tossing and turning. the other end of the capital, in Minister Shui's manor, there were also people who couldn't sleep. Recently, the court of the censorate had impeached 2 officials of the 6 ministries. His Majesty, after reading the memorials to the throne, had, according to convention, permitted the 2 of them to temporarily leave office to shut their doors and reflect on their conduct, while their case was handed over for investigation to the Imperial Court of Judicial Review. This was all in the ordinary course of business to begin with, and the so-called impeachment only concerned insignificant little problems. No one had taken it seriously. What no one had expected in a million years was that the shovel of the Imperial Court of Judicial Review would reach down all the way into the past. It really did dig up evidence of these 2 people perverting justice in exchange for bribes. Once the gap opened, there was no stopping it. The Imperial Court of Judicial Review's Minister Shui Kan was renowned at court for being upright and above flattery, unmoved by force or persuasion. Though he knew that both of these individuals belonged to the Jiangnan party, he still had no intention of letting them off easy. It wasn't long before the Imperial Court of Judicial Review's memorial came before the throne. Emperor Changxi was enraged and permitted the Ministry of Justice to keep those 2 people jailed in expectation of beheading, to be executed after the autumn trials. Oh, he wasn't messing around. Shui Shang lost 2 capable people in one go, instantly turning his position delicate. Emperor Changxi's attitude had also been slightly cold lately. This evening, Shui Shang had a guest at home. Shang Duan Wang, the Ministry of Right's assistant minister of the right and imperial instructor, who, like him, came from Jiangnan. He had brought him a piece of news that may have been good or bad. This afternoon, a messenger brought a military report from Xinan. The army has already been stationed outside the city in excess for a month. Yet the 2 sides have yet to cross swords and test each other. The Duke of Jing writes in his report that Duan Gaohong has sent envoys many times to the camp to ask to see the commander-in-chief. He plans in a few days to meet face-to-face with Commander Prince Siping and induce him to capitulate. When His Majesty had read the report, his expression simply wasn't to be beheld. He was so angry he shook. He asked me. We sent people over and over to Xinan, and he pleaded illness and wouldn't see them. So how come, as soon as Fu Shen gets there, he's in a hurry to explain himself? What unrighted wrong is there that we are unable to redress, one that he can only lay out before Fu Shen and no one else? Well, do you really want to know? 'Cause, you're not wrong. Shui Shang had been the first to approve Emperor Changxi's punitive expedition to Xinan, so every time some matter came up in the military situation in Xinan, Emperor Changxi would call him to the palace to discuss it. But now that he had been splashed with mud, he had missed his opportunity, allowing Shang Duanwen to appear in front of His Majesty. It sounded as if Emperor Changxi placed quite a bit of trust in him. The matter had profound implications, and Shang Duanwen was uncertain. He cautiously asked, Yuan Ping Xiang, listen, do you think that this means His Majesty is dissatisfied with Commander Prince Siping? Or does he have some notions about that gentleman? The Jiangnan party had always seen the Duke of Jing Fu Shen as a major enemy, not to speak of the large number of troops at his disposal. His ploy on Golden Terrace had nearly swept the Jiangnan families out of court, such that Shui Shang and the others periodically gave counsel before Emperor Changxi, along the lines of subjects of great merit causing trouble for their master and assembling a personal army being a potential challenge to the throne. Emperor Chang Shi pulled a long face as soon as Fu Shen was mentioned, now was in large part owning to the efforts of these people. Why can't they just leave the dude alone? Come on. Xu Shang smiled a cold inward smile and gathered up his many revolving thoughts. He wasn't in a hurry to answer. Instead, he asked in turn, How did you handle it? How did you handle it, Feng Di? Well, Shang Duanwen said hesitantly, I only said that Duan Gao Hong was a traitor, and even if he was offered amnesty and submitted, he might decide to rebel again later. This move on the Duke of Jing's part is rather inappropriate. Xue Shang raised a hand to smooth his mustache. He said meaningfully, Feng Di, do you still recall when the Tartars and Shi sent an embassy to Jinling to engage in peace negotiations with the court? At the time, Yan Xiaohan and Fu Shen were both at the front lines. The memorial to the throne they sent back then contained only a few words. Better fight to the death than negotiate peace. Why now, facing a mere commandery prince, has he become overcautious? You mean that... It's true that Duan Gao Hong is a former subordinate of Beiyuan, but that is a friendship that his father's generation held, a story that's grown long in the tooth. How could Fu Shen have an old comrade with him? It is only an excuse, Xue Shang said. No matter what the reason, Fu Shen is unwilling to meet Duan Gao Hong in battle. This is a truth no one can erase. With our court using such a person to face our enemy, what if he should coordinate an offensive with Duan Gao Hong? Wouldn't that cause great commotion? Weren't you the one who single-handedly egged on His Majesty to send him to the front lines in Shinan? Shinan. Duan Wen picked up a murderous edge in his even words, and a chill went up his back in spite of himself. Yunping Xiang, you mean that Fu Shen is colluding with Duan Gao Hong and intends to revolt? This is a major crime that people lose their heads for. Why would he do such a thing? It isn't why would he do such a thing. It's why would we do such a thing, Xue Shang said calmly. There are evidently people at court scheming against us. If we do not act now, the next ones to lose their officials' caps will be you and me. It isn't important whether Fu Shen is planning to revolt. We only need His Majesty to believe that he is going to revolt. If we can knock him down, the alliance of the Northerners will naturally crumble. Without us needing to step in, they will become mired in internal strife. That will be when our chance to act freely comes. The heat of the summer night was stifling, but a drop of cold sweat slid down Shang Wen's temple all the same. He really was on Xue Shang's side, but he had also heard the praises of the Beiyuan cavalry for quelling foreign enemies and defending the frontier for many years. Forming a faction was one thing, but how had it suddenly come to the point of making a false charge against a distinguished minister, finding happiness in Fu Shen's death? It's enough for His Majesty to believe that he is going to revolt. Wasn't this a trumped-up charge? With his mind in a daze, Shang Duanwen bid farewell to Xue Shang. With the butler leading him, he passed through the courtyard and came to the front gate. It was deep into the night, but there were still voices outside. When the two of them left through the gate, they found a young man of unremarkable height standing on the steps outside. He was watching with a squinting gaze, uttering filthy curses. The porter had a club in his hands. Expression fierce, he yelled, "Hurry up and leave! If you dare to make trouble again, I'll report you and have you arrested and sent to prison." Shang Duanwen came back from his thoughts at this yell. Putting on an official's severity, he slowly said, "Whence comes this hubbub late at night?" Xue Manor's butler frowned imperceptibly, then said to Shang Duanwen with an obsequious smile, Sorry. The servants are insolent. I will be certain to discipline them sternly. Please be magnanimous, Your Honor. Just then, the young man suddenly looked at Shang Duanwen and rudely asked, Did you come from in there? Do you know Shui Shang? I want to see him. Hurry up and tell him. Don't waste words. You'll hold up great affairs. Don't say I didn't warn you later. Shang Duanwen, a mighty minister of the Ministry of Rights, bossed around like a servant, became angry at once. But he had just stepped forward, ready to castigate the young man, when his gaze fell on his clothes and personal adornments. He changed what he was going to say at the last moment, asking, Who are you? What business do you have with Lord Shui? Impatience all over his face, the young man said, Let me in, and I'll naturally tell you. The butler could take no more of this and was planning to call over a servant to chase the brat away, but Shang Duanwen abruptly raised a hand to stop him. He said, Go in and notify Lord Shui. And then to the young man, he said, Come with me. The butler was all at sea, but he couldn't talk him out of it. He had to go inside and report to Shui Shang. Before long, Shang Duanwen led the young man inside and said a few words into Shui Shang's ear. Shui Shang's expression was astonished. Shortly, he turned to the young man and with a reasonable politeness asked, The servants have been rude. Please don't take offense, sir. What business brings you here so late at night? Have your servants withdraw, the young man said coldly. Leave only you and me. Then he pointed to Shang Duanwen. He stays, too. I wonder who it is. Hang on. Water break. Oh. Okay. Chapter 76. It had been pitch black outside just now, so Shang Duanwen hadn't noticed while leading him inside. Now that he was standing under the lights inside, he realized that one of the young man's legs was lame. Shui Shang dismissed the servants and invited the young man to sit down and speak. Might I inquire what the gentleman's name is? Fu Ya. Mocking expression appeared on the young man's face. With a crook of his lips, he said, I suppose your honor hasn't heard of me, but I have an older brother named Fu Shen whom you must know of. Shang Duanwen had seen outside that his clothing was all of rare quality, and that while there was only a purse hanging from his belt, it was also exquisitely made. He didn't look like a ruffian or a vagabond, and he had been unwilling to say his name. It was because of this that he had thought there was something fishy and brought him in. He had absolutely no idea that he had casually brought back their arch-rival's little brother. But to tell the truth, while they had been in the capital for some time, they had indeed heard nothing of this brother of Fu Shen's. When the Duke of Jing had still been the Marquis of Jinning, he had already moved out of the Duke of Ying manor to live elsewhere. All these years, he'd had little contact with his original residence, and they had hardly visited each other. After the turmoil of war, though the Duke of Ying Manor was in a daily decline, while his power and influence were at their prime, he still hadn't once stepped in to aid the Fu family. The disagreement between North and South was something that individuals outside of court couldn't experience. But as the son of nobility, Fu Ya ought to have an understanding of the situation at court. For him to come see Shui Shang at a time like this meant that he and his brother were not merely not close. They were instead at odds. When I was in the south, I heard that Lord Shui's beloved daughter killed herself with a grievance on account of the Empress, Fu Ya said. While your honor has not expressed it, I suppose you must harbor resentment to this day. With the scar suddenly prodded, Shui Shang's expression chilled slightly. Gravely, he said, "Since you know my hatred for those with the surname Fu, how can you still dare to come to my door?" "Because I'm the same as you. I also hate people with the surname Fu." Fuya laughed feverishly, and the tip of his tongue unconsciously licked his canine tooth. "Especially that one." In his manner was an undisguised, almost artless malice. When he laughed, his eyes narrowed, emitting a light like a viper's eyes, chilling the two men to the bone. A bit of sweat appeared in Shui Shang's palms. Forcing himself to be calm, he asked, "So what you're saying is, you want me to help you deal with him?" "No." Fuya shook his head and took something rolled up from his sleeve. He shook it at the two of them. As if flaunting, he said, "I am the one who has come to help you deal with him." Shui Shang didn't rush to ask for the item. He sat upright, unmoving. "Then what do you want from me, from young Master Fu?" Fu Ya's eyes turned. He made a gesture to him. This number in silver-backed banknotes. This was a gesture commonly used by traders. Shui Shang didn't understand it and turned his head to shoot a glance at Shang Duanwen. Shang Duanwen quickly said into his ears, 6,000 taels. Shui Shang nodded and said, "Will you allow me to see it first?" Fu Ya tossed the roll of papers to Shui Shang. Oh, there's a typo. They forgot an E. That's like number 3 typo that I noticed. All right. Fu Ya tossed the roll of papers to Shui Shang, and Shang Duanwen drew near to look as well. After skimming through it quickly, he gasped. Cold sweat streamed down from him. He couldn't even manage to speak smoothly. This is letters written between my own uncle and Xinan Nan's traitor Duan Gao Hong. The assassination attempt at the vast longevity feast that once caused a sensation in the capital is inextricably linked to him. Fu Ya crossed one leg over the other and asked in self-satisfaction, "How about it? Didn't expect that, did you?" There were 2 letters in the roll and some present lists and documents. On them was clearly stated in writing how many specialty products Shinan would send to the Duke of Ying Manor every year, and that Fu Tingyi would transfer these gifts of local products to the Qingshu Temple. Shui Shang's hand trembled slightly as he held the pages. The veins on the back of his hand broke out one by one. He had never thought that Fu Ya would dare to use this in exchange for money. "Do you know what this is?" "I know. How could I not? I'm not an idiot." With a manic laugh, Fu Ya said, "Who would have thought it? The capital's renowned useless third master turned out not to be useless, and under so many people's noses, he's been sending you all on a merry chase. Ha ha ha!" His laughter ceased abruptly, as if he had suddenly fallen into some kind of chaotic frenzy. Furiously, he said, "These bullshit dukes and generals, they're all fucking beasts. With their sanctimonious human skins, their mouths filled with false benevolence and righteousness. Who'd even think of what actually is in their hearts? He deserves to be married off to a man, his bloodline cut off, die and go to hell." Fu Ya's speech was full of filth, bringing loathing to the faces of Shu Shang and Shang Duanwen, both highly cultured civil officials. They didn't know how a perfectly good young master of good family could have been raised into this. He seemed to be demented in his fury, a deranged lunatic. Shang Duanwen gave a dry cough and said, "Young Master Fu, do you know what a great catastrophe these things will incur for the Duke of Ying Manor? Fu Tingyi is your elder. If he and Fu Shen have truly committed heinous crimes, even if you have the merit of reporting it, as a rule, you will also be punished. You must think it over. Shu Shang glanced at him, seemingly not to have expected him to be having this streak of benevolence. Fu Ya had sunk entirely into his own feelings and couldn't take in anything being said to him. He laughed so hard he rocked back and forth until he was hoarse. It seemed as if blood were about to burst from his throat. Let me die! Let all of us die! Leave no one behind! Then there's that dog, the boss of the Phelan Guard, Yan Xiaohan. He must be executed by being hacked to pieces. What a wonderful family of high-ranking officials, each and every one loyal and upright. At the end, everyone will be punished without distinction, be swept clean away. Ooh, boy. Yun Ping Xian, Shang Duanwen said quietly to Xu Shang. From his appearance, he seems to be exhibiting symptoms of taking autumn night white. He's delirious. The credibility of his words must be investigated before we act upon them. I know. Shui Shang carefully rolled up the pages and, not batting an eyelash, gave his guest notice to leave. It is already late. Feng Di, return home. We'll see about having someone make arrangements for little young Master Fu. What we spoke of tonight must not reach the ears of another. Shang Duanwen's heart went cold. He bowed deeply to Shui Shang. Then I will leave it to you, Yuan Ping Xian. The dim candlelight cast deep shadows beneath Shui Shang's sunken eyes and nostrils. His face was like a sharply cut statue, all expression concealed behind indifference. Out of nowhere, he seemed aged and strangely grim. He nodded lightly to Shang Duanwen and said, Go on. The moment he stepped out of Shui Manor, the gates shut gently behind Shang Duanwen. He let out a long breath and unexpectedly had the impression that he had narrowly escaped death. There was a chill in the late-night air that raised all the hairs on the back of Shang Duanwen's neck. His whole body was soaked, his clothing sticking to his back. But he had no thought to spare for his condition now. He hastily got into the carriage and ordered the driver to take him home. The next day, Shang Duanwen pleaded illness and asked for leave to remain at home. He never went to court again. It was said that he was elderly and had picked up a chill on the way home at night. The next day, the servants found him lying in bed, half his body paralyzed, the corners of his mouth crooked. They quickly brought in an imperial physician to treat him, pronounced that he had had an attack of apoplexy. Because he had not been treated in time, it was impossible for him to recover to his previous condition. He had to stay in bed and convalesce, take medicine, and recover over time. When Xu Shang heard this, he didn't seem surprised, and he wasn't at all regretful. He ordered his butler to send medicinal ingredients to the Shang family, rounding off this shallow friendship between the colleagues. Within 2 days, the Duke of Ying Manor's little young master suddenly disappeared. His family came weeping to report it to the officials in Xuantian Prefecture. Sadly, the present was unlike the past. The chaos of war had sent the Duke of Ying Manor, which had already been slipping, completely into decline. No one was even willing to pay attention to a superficial matter like this report to the authorities. The petty official who received the case impatiently went through the motions, then tossed the dossier aside to collect dust. So are we thinking this was Yan Xiaohan, or are we thinking this was Shui Shang? Place your bets! Place your bets! The tail end of high summer still remained, and autumn had yet to arrive, but there was already omens speaking of the autumn of all things. Xu Shang sat upright at his writing desk, listening carefully to a subordinate reporting on what he had investigated concerning Fu Ya's life. After hearing it, he smiled coldly. Inadequate son of a mighty father, if Fu Ting Shang knew what a fine son he had fathered, would he sit up from his coffin? Some years ago, Yan Xiaohan had twice punished Fu Ya, openly and in secret. Once had been cutting off his line of descent, and another had been having him dragged out of the wedding banquet and beaten. That ruthless beating had given Fu Ya pause for a time, but before he could think of how to get his revenge, the chaos of war had broken out. The capital had been breached by foreigners, and Fu Tingyi had taken his whole family to flee to Jiangnan. The journey had been a jolting one, and survival had been critical. No one had had time to spare to look after him carefully. Sticky Fu Ya had held out until Jinling. Then Jiangnan's winter was extremely damp and cold, and the wound to his leg hadn't entirely healed. It had left behind lameness. Ironically, his big brother, with both legs crippled, was galloping on the battlefield, while Fu Ya, perfectly healthy, had in the end become lame. With a lame leg and no offspring, Fu Ya was unable to settle his mind, and on coming to a dizzyingly luxurious place of drunken dreams like Jinling, he began to loiter in brothels, living a life of debauchery, spending without restraint. And Fu Tingyi was an unworldly being with one foot nearly in the immortal realms. He was unwilling to spare attentions to discipline him, which had let him fritter his time away until now. He had picked up Autumn Night White in the brothels of Jiangnan, and after returning to the capital had still needed to keep taking the drug. His allowance had been insufficient, so he had bit by bit begun to steal things from home to pawn them. In the capital, white dew powder was contraband goods, prohibited by an explicit order from the local authorities. It could only be bought off the black market, and the price was exorbitant. Fu Ya not only sold off his own things, he even stole his mother's dowry and sold it. Oof. When he was discovered by Madame Qin, there was a storm of Madame Qin. There was a storm of crying and cursing, ruining the household's peace, throwing it into total disarray. The Duke of Ying, Fu Tingyi, couldn't stand noise in the house and simply packed his bags and went to live in a Taoist temple, putting it and him out of sight and out of mind. Fu Ya had been upbraided by his mother and didn't dare to extend his hand towards her room. He was truly hard up, so he snuck by night into Fu Tingyi's room and turned it upside down. Yet he didn't find anything worth money. He had become bold, and he was in urgent need of money. He suspected that Fu Tingyi, disdaining them, had secretly taken the family property to the temple. So Fu Ya hired a marketplace thief and ordered him to steal some things from Fu Tingyi's lodgings. The outcome was that the thief went in circles around the plain room for ages and finally turned up a locked wooden box in the depths of the wardrobe. He believed with all his heart that there would be silver-backed banknotes hidden inside, and had gladly and diligently brought it to Fu Ya. While the lock was ingenious and hard to open, Fu Ya had been desperate and simply cut a hole in one side of the box. When he finally got it open and looked, he found that inside was a stack of correspondence with Shinan. However stupid Fu Ya might be, he still knew how serious these things were. He was at once shocked by Fu Tingyi's hidden depths and realized with clarity that this might be a heaven-sent opportunity. With these things in his hands, he could bring down the whole Fu family to ruin in no time. He could also drag Fu Shen down from the sacred altar so that he would never be able to get back up. While the overmastering pleasure and desire for destruction surged through his body, Fu Ya could still free up half of his thoughts to consider calmly. He couldn't simply take this evidence and make a report, because next to Fu Shen there was still the cunning Yan Xiaohan. If he delivered himself up, it would be no different from walking into a trap. His resources and manpower were limited. He needed to find a person who could contend against Yan Xiaohan and Fu Shen. Use that person's hand to accomplish this business. After repeated deliberation and discreet inquiries, he had gone to Shui Shang's gate with his proof of allegiance. In the study, Shu Shang's subordinate finished his report, then added, "Your Honor, with such important letters, why would Fu Tingyi not have burned them after he read them, but keep them with him? Could it be a trap the whole family has put together?" Shu Shang shook his head. This matter concerned Shinan. However bold Fu Tingyi might be, he still wouldn't dare to test me with a thing like this. The reason he had kept these things is none other than fear of asking a tiger for its skin. He kept these as evidence in case he got into a tiff with Duan Gao Hong one day. But it's hard to protect against traitors from within. Half sighing with emotion and half sneering, he said to himself, "Duke of Jing, this is the will of heaven. Don't blame me for helping you on your way." The next day, Shu Shang went to the palace to have an audience with the emperor. He dismissed everyone and presented the private correspondence between the Duke of Ying, Fu Tingyi, and Shinan to Emperor Chengxi. Commandery Prince Shi Ping, the Duke of Jing, the Duke of Ying. Emperor Chengxi said, "Fine," 3 times in a row. He seemed unable to control the directions his facial muscles moved in, making him seem exceptionally savage. Holding up these letters, he trembled for ages, then suddenly stood. With a wave of his sleeve, he swept the writing brush and inkstone and teacups from the desk. Clenching his teeth, he shouted angrily, "Traitors and rebels! They have hoodwinked us grievously." When the eunuch outside the door heard this, he opened the hall door a crack in trepidation. He just happened to be glimpsed by Emperor Chengxi, who picked up a white jade washing bowl, and hurled it at the door. Wrathfully, he said, "Get the hell out!" With a crash, the room fell into silence. Shu Shang stood amid the mass, deeply pleased with himself, and perfunctorily counseled, "Your Majesty, calm yourself." After standing rigid for a moment, Emperor Chengxi fell straight into his chair. His countenance was purplish, his chest heaving violently. He panted unceasingly and mumbled, "2 dukes in 1 family. Ha! A high position with handsome pay, yet it turned out a bunch of heartless and ungrateful curs." Seeing him in such a violent rage, Shu Shang finally stepped forward and deferentially said, "Your Majesty, I have a request to make of the throne." Emperor Chengxi broke off a small portion of his attention from his daze and said, "Go on." Shu Shang raised the hems of his robes and knelt in the center of the big hall, kowtowing. "The Duke of Ying, Fu Tingyi, has colluded with Shinan's traitorous vassal Duan Gao Hong, attempted to assassinate the retired emperor, and endangered the state. The Duke of Jing knew of this and failed to report it, instead shielding him and concealing these matters on his behalf. He also had a deep friendship with Duan Gao Hong. These 3 are thorough traitors. If they are not eradicated, we will one day revolt. With matters as they now stand, I would make so bold as to request your Majesty to act on behalf of future generations. Be decisive when the time to make a decision comes. Wipe out the Fu family and their rebel faction to avoid future trouble." After the shock he had given him, Emperor Chengxi recovered with difficulty and wearily said, "Dear Minister Shui, what decision do you suggest I make?" "Permit me to reply, Your Majesty. Fu Shen is in Shinan, and he is able to coordinate at a distance with the troops at the northern frontier. If the imperial court of the censorate takes part in the case, and the 3 judicial chief ministries conduct a joint trial, it will be bound to incur discussion, which will gravely thwart the proceedings. If he is forced to an impasse, Fu Shen will join with Duan Gao Hong and revolt then and there. And there will be absolutely nothing the court can do about him," Shui Shang said. "It is my belief that the only plan possible now is to strike in secret. First kill the head of the conspiracy, then mop up the remnants. In this way, future trouble can be prevented without being likely to lead to instability at the northern frontier." Oh, so just like before. For Chang Shi's heart instantly lurched. While his anger had gone to his head, he knew that when it came to punishing an important minister like Fu Shen, one had to give him a chance to defend himself. He hadn't expected Shui Shang to come out with a fatal stroke at once. In spite of himself, he said, After all, Fu Shen has performed great service for the nation. How could we use methods like this against him? Your Majesty is generous, but a traitor and rebel will not appreciate your concern, Shui Shang said softly. Your Majesty, have you forgotten how Fu Shen compelled you back when the army surrounded the capital? Fu Shen has great popularity at court and many adherents to his faction. If not for that, he would not have had the boldness to dupe his sovereign. Lying prostrate with his forehead touching the ground, he wailed, If that traitor is not eliminated, the land and the state will be in great danger. Please reconsider, Your Majesty. Emperor Chang Shi was silent. On the surface, Shui Shang was all awe-inspiring sorrow, but inwardly he was calmly waiting for Emperor Chang Shi to think carefully. He knew that the thorn planted in His Majesty's heart in former days would ultimately sprout before this ironclad evidence, turning into poisonous vines, seize his mind and reason. Fu Shen must die. No matter how loyal and upright he normally was, even if he had retaken the territory of the north for Emperor Chang Shi, none of that trust was reliable. A person wouldn't necessarily remember all the good that another person did, but he would certainly remember all offense and injury. If a white jade annulus had the smallest nick, it wouldn't be far from cracking. Indeed, after a lengthy silence, Emperor Chang Shi spoke roughly. His voice was even somewhat hoarse and trembling. Dear Minister, what strategy do you offer? Shui Shang counted his own breaths, waited until the deafening pulse in his ears had slowly receded, then at last, with an altered countenance, bowed once more and said, I am dull-witted. I am willing to aid your Majesty in these difficulties, serve you faithfully. Outside of Yangshin Hall, the eunuch keeping watch at the door could only hear the dialogue inside in intermittent snatches through the crack. A few words and phrases were enough to make him quake with terror. The hands hidden in his sleeves were full of sweat. After a long while, the vermilion doors creaked as they were pushed open from within. Shui Shang stepped out of the hall and paused at the steps. He narrowed his eyes with his head raised to the overwhelming sunlight. The eunuch stole a glance at him and inexplicably thought that while there was no expression on Minister Zhui's face, there was clearly a smile spinning extremely slowly from the corner of his eyes. It was a cold smile of having a well-laid plan and being certain of success, a smile that hid knives and poison. Yuan Shen, Emperor Chang Shi called from the hall. The eunuch named Yuan Shen quickly averted his gaze and trotted in. In a mincing voice he said, At your service? Have the hall cleaned up, Emperor Chang Shi said. Go make us a cup of tea. Take this decree to have a seal affixed and have it sent at once to Shinan. Yuan Shen bent his head and received the imperial decree with both hands, then went to carry out his orders. That night, an army messenger carrying the imperial decree sent out from the capital at top speed, racing toward Shinan. That same night, Wei Shushou received Yuan Zhen's notice and immediately sent a trusted aide to travel through the night to Jinling to pass the information to Yan Xiaohan. The imperial guards left to watch the capital sent the information as quickly as was in their power. But after all, there was no match for Shui Shang, who had been prepared in advance. By the time Yuan Xiaohan received the letter from the capital and set off in a hurry for Shinan, he was a step too late. On the 5th day of the 7th month in the 4th year of Chengxi, the Duke of Jin, Fu Shen, suffered an assassination attempt during a face-to-face meeting with Shinan's rebel general Duan Gaohong. He vomited blood and fainted on the spot. In the chaotic fighting, Fu Shen was carried off by Shinan's rebel army, his condition and his whereabouts unknown. So, you tried to kill the guy that just keeps coming back. You failed, and now you probably just pushed an actual revolt. Congratulations. I mean, like, third assassination attempt, the charm. Gotta be something to it. Sorry, I'm just checking to see if I dented any of them yet. Oh my goodness, what did my voice just do? Chapter 77. On the 7th day of the 7th month, Yan Shaohan traveled through the night and carried wind and frost, charged brazenly into the Shinan's military camp. He was set in with a sword at his throat. Duan Gaohong was at loose ends dealing with everything he had to attend to. Hearing that this court lackey had burst into his camp, he simply flew into a rage. Stamping with fury, he said, "How can you have the face to come? Jing Yuan is here with you, right?" Yan Shaohan seemed not to feel the sword at his throat. He strode towards Duan Gaohong. "Where is he?" A bodyguard was afraid he would harm Duan Gaohong. He quickly brandished his sword and said, "Stop! I asked you, where is he?" As Yan Shaohan bellowed, the sharp blade sliced through his neck, and fresh blood came zigzagging down, instantly staining a large portion of his collar red. Red-eyed, Yan Shaohan looked at Duan Gaohong. In a hurry, he removed his sword and dagger and threw them to the ground. He was burning with impatience, his words almost beseeching. "You can kill me or cut me to pieces as you like, but let me see him, your highness." Duan Gaohong froze, saying to himself that Yan Shaohan shouldn't be so frantic, should he? Didn't the two of them only get on in public? Had the arranged marriage really turned into genuine feeling? Frowning, he asked, "Who sent you? The emperor?" Shui Shang advised His Majesty to kill Jing Yuan in secret, and I wasn't in the capital. I rushed over here from Jinling after receiving word from my spies in the capital. His travel-stained appearance and the exhaustion on his face couldn't be faked. From east to west, it was a distance of 1,000 li, and Yan Shaohan had covered it in less than 2 days. He hadn't once closed his eyes. If not even this could be taken for sincerity, then he had no choice but to die on the spot so Duan Gaohong could see it. Your Highness, it was the Fei Long Guard that took the lead in investigating the assassination attempt at the vast longevity feast. I know that Chuan Yang is your man, and I know that white dew powder spread from Shinan. Jing Yuan never concealed the friendship between the two of you from me. Urgently, Yan Shaohan said. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come here directly to see you. You couldn't have hurt him. It must have been a plant of His Majesty's at his side. It was that damned emperor who put them up to it? At first, Duan Gaohong had only had a faint suspicion. Now with Yan Shaohan's verification, his fury instantly soared. He shouted out his inner feelings. Fine! The father gets through harming him, then the son wants to harm him too. Did Fu Shen kill the whole Sun family in a past life that he should deserve to be tormented by them like this in this lifetime? A decorated war hero covered in scars, yet that was still worth less than a few words before the emperor from a favored minister. Fu Shen had spent his life fighting for great show, and in the end he had come to this sorry fate. Like feels for like. Thinking about this, what did his 2 decades amount to? His loyal and righteous heart had been taken and trampled on. His profound kindness and friendship had been used to let him down. When Duan Gaohong finished roaring, his anger dispersed, and boundless cold and grief surged up in his heart. He stood there blankly for a moment, like a lion who had finally noticed that he had grown old. When he spoke again, his tone was lower. Go ahead and leave. There's no need for you to see him again. Just treat him as dead. In the future, don't burden him with this nation again. Yan Shouhan was still in the midst of a pain like having all his organs rupture. He wasn't really all that lucid. All his mental energy was hanging from that thread of pain. He had done his utmost to be polite, to Duan Gaohong to be tactful. But when he spoke these last words, Yan Shouhan truly couldn't hold back. Your Highness, don't you have the slightest idea whose burdens have brought him to this state? What right do you have to feel aggrieved on his account? He finally tore through the appearance of goodwill and glared coldly at Duan Gaohong. The words he spoke were more aggressive than a sharp sword. The reason he came to the front lines at Shinan, the reason His Majesty wanted to kill him, isn't it all because of you, Commander Prince Shiping? If not for you scorning the Emperor over and over, how could the court and Shinan have reached the point of open fighting? If not for the sake of keeping you safe, what need would there have been for Jing Yuan to drag this out for 3 months, unwilling to open hostilities, such that the Emperor began to doubt him? There was a rare sternness on his face. Aggressively he asked, "If your Highness's heart aches so much for Jing Yuan, then why haven't you considered all this? When everything was going fine, why would His Majesty suddenly decide he wanted him dead?" His repeated questions struck Duan Gaohong into blankness. Before, he had only seen Yan Shouhan once at a distance, and thought he was only a useless decorative pillow. He had no idea that when he deployed his imposing manner to its fullest extent, it would be in no way inferior to what people like him, who had come off the battlefield, could manage. When his seemingly frosted-over eyes swept over him, Duan Gaohong even had a slight impulse to retreat. Yan Shouhan said, "You colluded in private with the Duke of Ying, used his hand to sell Autumn Night White at a high price in the capital. You thought the plan was seamless, that no one would ever be the wiser. But now it's all been exposed, and it's Jing Yuan who has ended up bearing the blame for the two of you. Before, he preferred to accept the arranged marriage rather than revolt, and now, because of your little dirty dealings with the Duke of Ying, the heart's blood he spilled over half a lifetime is all gone for nothing. You still have the face to complain of injustice against him? Your Highness, forgive me for being blunt, but if you really want to let him live some years longer, then mind your own hands, don't do what you shouldn't do, and don't hatch any plans you shouldn't hatch." Woo, buddy. Yan Shouhan was also mad with anger, without any sensibility left. His interrogation had practically run up against Gao. His interrogation had practically run up against Duan Gaohong's dignity, but Duan Gaohong wasn't at leisure to take note of the offense. He mumbled, "It's because of me?" "You have committed the sin, but he is the one being struck by lightning," Yan Shouhan said. "Your Highness, I'm the one who ought to beg you. I'll kneel and beg you to let Jing Yuan off, not burden him again. All right?" This blow was steady, accurate, and relentless. When it fell, Duan Gaohong was rendered entirely speechless. "Stop arguing!" Du Lang, busy with rescue work in the inner room, could at last listen to this no longer. Loudly he called, "Lord Yan, come in and lend a hand." This time, no one stopped him. Yan Shouhan strolled in. With a single look, he felt that his soul had been yanked out. In his aching lungs was the belated fear of having narrowly escaped disaster. Floating like a wandering ghost, he silently came to the side of the sick bed. Fu Shen was lying in bed with his eyes closed, his face as white as paper, his lips bluish, acupuncture needles stuck into half his body. If not for the slight undulation of his chest, there would hardly have been any difference between him and a corpse. Du Lang was so busy that his head was streaming with sweat. He was Duan Gaohong's man. He was also an army doctor. When Fu Shen had been attacked, he had snuck over and defected to the enemy to snatch him back from the hands of the kings of the underworld. He hadn't shut his eyes for a day and a night. His voice was hoarse, so his words were unusually tense and cold. "If the general struggles, I won't be able to hold him down. Help me." But Yan Xiaohan had yet to recover his senses. He stood still by the bedside, rigid from his fingertips to the ends of his hair. Du Lang clicked his tongue. He backhandedly pulled out an acupuncture needle and held it between his fingers. With a cold flash, he took aim at an acupuncture on Yan Xiaohan's back and stabbed. Yan Xiaohan shook all over as if having convulsions, then suddenly turned his head again and abruptly coughed up a mouthful of blood. Acute anxiety. Your vital energy and blood were running backwards, Du Lang said flatly. Don't just stand there and don't be in a hurry to cry. I'm going to pull out the needles. You hold him down for me. If he can make it through the night, he'll be all right when he wakes. Sit. Yan Xiaohan coughed twice. Thanks to Du Lang's needle, his mind had cleared from its maddened chaos. He quickly wiped clean the bloodstains on his hand and sat at the bedside. He reached out to take hold of Fu Shen's shoulders. I'm a little surprised. I know, hyperfocus. I'm a little surprised Du Lang didn't say anything about, the neck wound that this dude is now supposedly sporting that, just gushed past. No one's going to do anything about that. Anyway, Fu Shen was also as cold as death. His temperature made Yan Xiaohan's heart give a violent shake. An ominous thought suddenly arose. In his terror, he thought irrelevantly, if Fu Shen really did die, what would he do? As Du Lang removed the needles, Fu Shen's body gradually warmed. Faint tremors began to appear in his arms and legs. When only the needles and the major acupoints on his torso remained, he furrowed his brow in his unconsciousness. His right hand came up slightly and made a grab in midair. Yan Xiaohan quickly reached out, and his wrist was immediately grasped by Fu Shen. Careful. Du Lang shot him a glance and warned. Hold him down. The next moment, with both hands working in unison, he swiftly pulled out the remaining acupuncture needles. Fu Shen's body gave a violent spasm. Then he began to struggle as if he had lost his mind. Yan Xiaohan was nearly elbowed off the bed. Sharp pain exploded in his right wrist. Jing Yuan! Don't let go, said Du Lang. In a moment of emergency, Yan Xiaohan threw himself forward and hugged the incessantly struggling man, allowing the gaunt, hard bones and joints to collide against his chest. It caused a series of dull thumps, but he didn't groan from start to finish. He wouldn't let go, not even in death. The two of them were locked in a stalemate for a long time. Fu Shen's struggles gradually weakened. At this, Yan Xiaohan panicked a little. He was just about to ask Du Lang what was wrong when he heard a faint sound coming from the throat of the person in his arms. Then a mouthful of blood sprayed out. Half of Yan Xiaohan's heart instantly went cold. But Du Lang heaved a large sigh of relief. His legs went weak and he collapsed into a chair. It's done. Let him spit up all the blood. Yan Xiaohan said nothing. He didn't dare to feel relieved. As long as he lived, he wouldn't forget tonight's scene. Fu Shen in his arms, coughing up mouthful after mouthful of blood. Him watching the blood turn gradually from purplish black to dark red. At last, the whole room reeked of blood. The fronts of both of their clothes were covered in blood, as if they had sat down in a pool of it. Ugh. Then suddenly he could no longer feel pain or worry. Instead, he seemed unusually calm. Holding this person who was on his last gasp, there was only one thought in his mind. If Fu Shen died, he would go to the capital and rip off the emperor's rotten head, then stab himself and go down to keep him company. Everyone would become ashes together. No one would be spared. Duan Gaohong had entered the inner room at some point. Fu Shen had stopped coughing up blood and had sunk into a stupor. He stood waiting a while at a slight distance and saw that Yan Xiaohan didn't react and gave a slightly awkward cough. Well, listen, Why don't you go change, have Dulang bandaged up your wound, and then come watch over him? Oh, thank you. Someone actually mentioned it. Yan Xiaohan tilted his head slightly. He had clearly understood. Supporting the back of Fu Shen's head, he carefully and gently laid him back into the pillows. Then he stood, his back perfectly straight. Cold-faced, but without discourtesy, he nodded to Duan Gaohong. Will you please have a tub of hot water brought in, Your Highness? I will bathe once I have wiped the blood off him. Oh. Duan Gaohong hadn't expected him to be so polite. He froze momentarily. All right. The man from before, his words like knives, aggressive but red-eyed with anxiety, seemed to have swapped souls. He was enveloped in a chill that kept people 1,000 li away. He had turned indifferent and self-possessed, urbanly polite. Had Fu Shen been awake, perhaps he would have recognized this as his most familiar aspect, that of the imperial investigator of the Feilong Guard. This was the crafty sycophant who had brought destruction unto the empire, stopping at nothing, wicked and merciless. Yan Xiaohan cleaned Fu Shen and put him into clean clothes, and went to an outer room himself to wash off the dust of the road. When he returned, he sat idly all night at Fu Shen's bedside by light of a not very bright little lamp. Neither Duan Gaohong nor Du Lang tactlessly came forward to disturb him. In the still long night, he held Fu Shen's hand, which refused to warm up, pressed a kiss as light as a dragonfly skimming the water onto his dry lips. His heart was full of roaring flames, hatred rising to the skies, but the kiss was soft and restrained, as if he couldn't stand to shatter a beautiful dream. Yan Xiaohan whispered into his ear, I'm going to kill him. Hoo, hoo, hoo. And this is where you just see the meme, oh, you done fucked up now. Chapter 78. The world was cold, hard, gray-white, and he seemed to be locked into an iron-gray cage, unable to distinguish night from day, unable to feel the passage of time. Only his consciousness was still feebly active, interminably asking him, Who am I? Where am I? The gray world gradually lit up, and he raised his hand to feel rough stone grooves. The sensation touched certain memories, and he remembered. This was the wall of Yangshou City. When he was 8, his second uncle had taken him to the grasslands, to the Beiyuan army's sternly guarded garrison, and up onto the city gate arch of Yanshou City. He had been a little sprout then, not even as tall as the wall's battlements. He had tensed his little arms to cling to the cracks in the wall, and then Fu Tingxin had picked him up and put him on his shoulders. In that moment, the world became vast, the mountains and rivers remote. Outside the city were boundless mountains and grasslands. Inside the city sat orderly and clean houses and streets. Outside the city were sentry posts and war horses idly eating grass. Inside the city were crowds of people coming and going. Tall steamers, not streamers. Tall steamers selling steamed buns, which let out a big cloud of steam when the lid was raised. Fu Tingxin had still looked very young, the skin of his face blown somewhat coarse by the winds of the border, his beard scraggly, but that didn't cover up his height and his handsomeness. When he smiled, there was an unexpected little dimple in his left cheek. Let's go back, Holding him on his shoulders, Fu Tingyi turned and descended the city wall. The sky is getting dark. It's going to rain soon. He reached out his hand in confusion. Indeed, from the vast slate-gray dome of heaven, a few little raindrops pattered down. The scene suddenly shifted. This time he was standing at the top of Yanshou's city wall, already grown tall, become an adult, like a cold steel sword facing into the wind. Outside was a dense and dark Shi army. He no longer needed to sit on anyone's shoulders to overlook this patch of earth. General, a black-armored, kindly-faced lieutenant general, walked over to him. The Bayuan cavalry is all assembled. We can join battle at once. Fine. He reached out his hand and caught a raindrop that suddenly fell. A propose for nothing. He softly said, "It's raining." The scene changed again. He was kneeling amidst heavy rain, cold to the marrow as it poured over him. His deep red hem was like a maple leaf floating on the water, unwilling to drift away. At the end of the tiled floor were the tightly shut vermilion palace gates. Icy rain hit his face nonstop. His mind was a blank. He only dimly thought that something was missing. In confusion, he asked himself, "Who am I waiting for?" Countless scenes flashed before his eyes like a revolving lantern. He saw many faces, some familiar and some that had blurred in his memory. Yet that certain person who ought to have appeared at the depths of his memory wasn't there. But he clearly had no memories of that person. The scene suddenly fixed on a certain image. It was still raining heavily, but the rain was kept out by the building. There was only the endless sound of the rain. He was leaning on a club with one leg crossed over the other, his gaze wandering and unfocused, falling absently onto the profile of the man who had sat down by the fire. That person seemed very indifferent towards him, hardly attending. When he stared at him, he wouldn't turn his head his way. He thought, "Have I offended him?" Thinking it over carefully, he seemed to have said something just now, seemingly something not very pleasant, and that person had at once turned hostile. The memories accompanied by the dimly heard sound of the rain surged together into his mind. Icy drops of water struck his face. He finally realized that this wasn't rain. If I left him to drift through the world all alone, I wouldn't be able to close my eyes even in death. Why won't he speak? Is it because he doesn't trust me? As soon as he recalled these words, it was like a beam of light passing through the sky, illuminating the chaotic universe. All the vague, disorderly memories gradually took on their original colors once again. Through his tightly shut eyelids, he sensed for the first time the daylight of the outside world. Fu Shen's fingers, curled up in Yan Xiaohan's hand, twitched slightly. Just this tiny, almost imperceptibly slight movement succeeded in nailing a living man in place. When Yan Xiaohan spoke, his voice was hoarse and the tail ends of his words shook. "Army Doctor Du, I think he moved just now." "Really?" Du Ling suspected that he was being oversensitive and walked over. "Let me see." Yan Xiaohan stood up from the bedside, planning to make room for him. He was just about to let go when he suddenly felt a tightness at his fingertips as he was held fast. "Don't go." Those tightly closed eyes were now open. The rims of Yan Xiaohan's eyes instantly reddened. From fingertips to arm, he stiffened into a club. He shoved out a few sounds practically from the depths of his throat. Not daring to believe in softer than silk, he asked, "Jing Yuan?" Like a cruel and heartless queen mother breaking up lovebirds, Du Lang pushed apart their clasped hands and charged forward to take Fu Shen's pulse. He said, "Make way! General, how do you feel now? Does anything hurt?" Fu Shen wanted to shake his head, but he had been in bed so long that he was powerfully dizzy. He had to lay unmoving. In a weak voice, he said, "It doesn't hurt, just dizzy. I just had a dream. I dreamed of kumquats falling from the sky. They knocked me awake. Just feel if you don't believe me. My face? It's wet? Yan Xiaohan was pointedly silent. Du Lang, his expression holding volumes, turned his head and looked at Yan Xiaohan with his still reddened eyes. What kind of tears could knock a person awake from a deep stupor? He must have been weeping the fucking elixir of life. Oh, man. Fu Shen's eyes never left Yan Xiaohan. Du Lang, enduring the atmosphere of the room, which was very unfriendly towards him, devotedly and conscientiously examined Fu Shen and finally said, that's the funniest line. Yeah. The poison has been cured. Though your internal organs were injured, there's no great harm. I'll prescribe you 2 medicines, and after a period of recovery, you'll be leaping and frisking around. That really is the funniest line, Momar's Rover. The kind of tears can knock a person awake from a deep stupor. Must have been weeping the fucking elixir of life. That's gonna be a favorite. Thank you, Fu Shen said feebly. You've taken a lot of trouble. Du Lang waved a hand. He didn't want to exchange civilities with him. He gave Yan Xiaohan some instructions concerning prohibited food and drink, then very tactfully took his leave. When his steps had faded outside the door, Fu Shen reached out towards Yan Xiaohan, standing rigid at the foot of his bed, and said, Come here. What for? Yan Xiaohan immediately fell out of that completely non-responsive state and abruptly realized that he had forgotten himself. He walked over quickly and leaned down to ask, What's wrong? Fu Shen grabbed his hand, brought it to his lips, and lightly rubbed them against it. Nothing, he said softly. I just wanted to kiss you. Stop crying. With utmost restraint, Yan Xiaohan drew in a lengthy gasp. It was as if someone had tapped one of his acupoints. His whole body went rigid, and he even forgot how to blink. A big drop of water fell right onto the back of Fu Shen's hand. Gave you a scare, huh? Fu Shen pulled up the corners of his mouth and laughed very softly. It's fine. I'm awake, aren't I? Yan Xiaohan slowly leaned down, not daring to use force, but still as tightly as possible. He hugged him and buried his face in the hollow of his neck, an ear pressed to the pulse beating there. There were countless things he wanted to tell him, but he couldn't manage a single word. Could only call out to him in a trembling voice, Qing Yuan. Yes, don't be scared, Fu Shen said. I told you before, if I left you alone in the world, I wouldn't close my eyes even in death. This isn't a joking matter to make a casual promise about. Therefore, you have to trust me. Enough talk about dying and living. You're just running at the mouth. When Yan Xiaohan raised his head again, there were no more visible signs of crying. Carefully kissed the corner of Fu Shen's mouth and gentle as water said, Sit up. Drink some water, all right? Fu Shen nodded. His eyes curved as he regarded him. There was inexplicable tenderness and affection in his gaze. Yan Xiaohan built him a thick nest from the pillow and quilt, then stood to pour water. Those few sentences just now, having used up all his strength, Fu Shen half closed his eyes in exhaustion and leaned against the head of the bed, but his mind was very clear. He remembered how a few days earlier the army dispatch sent back from the capital had given official written acquiescence for him to engage in peace talks with Shinan's rebel army. So Fu Shen had had a crude tent set up between the two armies and arranged a face-to-face meeting with Duan Gaohang. The day things went wrong, for the sake of appearances, he and Duan Gaohang had both left their guards outside, and each one of them had only brought a lieutenant general into the tent. The outcome was that before they had said a couple of sentences, when he went to pick up his teacup, the world had suddenly spun before his eyes. Sweetness had surged up in his throat. His vision had gone dark, and he had fallen. With his awareness on the point of dissipating, Fu Shen had heard his own lieutenant general shout, An ambush! It's a trap! His own last thought at the time had also been that it was a trap. Duan Gaohong couldn't have poisoned him. That lieutenant general was lying through his teeth. It had to be him. Here, rinse your mouth first. Yan Shouhan put an arm around him from behind and brought a small teacup to his lips. A few years down the line, his skills in caretaking didn't seem unpracticed. As instructed, Fu Shen rinsed his mouth, then drank a few mouthfuls out of his hand. Only then did he feel that he had thoroughly come back to life. How did you get that? Fu Shen asked, eyes fixed on the bandage on his neck. He had spat up blood several times, and this body was weak. He didn't dare to exert himself when he spoke. All his words were very soft. Your neck. Yan Shouhan split off his attention to look down and indifferently said, had a little disagreement with His Highness and got a little scrape. Nothing major. More water? Fu Shen shook his head to indicate that he didn't want more and leaned limply against his shoulder. In my condition now, I can't help you get back at him. You'll have to arrange a duel with him yourself another day. He'd even beat up his nephew's wife. Disgraceful. Duan Gaohong, having heard that Fu Shen was awake, was just getting ready to walk in to pay him a visit. He was rendered speechless. What the hell was this? An ingrate who forgot his mother as soon as he had a wife? Did he just call himself his mother? Oh, goodness. Yan Shouhan finally couldn't resist laughing quietly. Hugging him, he said in a faintly grousing tone, You're sick. Why do you still have idle chatter in you? His Highness went to all that trouble to rescue you, and you just want to beat him up. Outside the room, Duan Gaohong, who had taken a step forward, took it back, dithered briefly, and then went with complicated emotions. Inside the room, Fu Shen secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said to himself, Oh God, he's finally laughing. He knew that he had given Yan Shouhan a scare. That he could dream meant that his subconscious had already recovered its sense of the outside world. He just hadn't woken up yet himself. So the rain he had constantly felt dripping on his hand in his dreams probably hadn't been an illusion. A weeping beauty was, of course, also a lovely sight, but in his current condition, he couldn't hug him or cheer him up, so it would be better to get past it. That lieutenant general of mine. As soon as Fu Shen spoke, he was uncompromisingly shut up by Yan Shouhan. You don't need to worry about any of that. Leave it to me. You just need to get better, and I won't be worried about anything. Fu Shen didn't fight him over it. He buried his face against his chest. My wife has the final word. Fu Shen's energy was failing. Soon he was drowsy. Yan Shouhan personally fed him his medicine, then appropriately tucked him into his bedding. When he was about to leave, Fu Shen suddenly opened his eyes and pulled on his sleeve. Where are you going? Going to say a few words to His Highness. I'll be back very soon, Yan Shouhan said gently. Sleep. You're not allowed to go. Fu Shen dragged him towards the bed. Come, lie down with me for a while. How long since you last slept? Yan Shouhan froze. All his exhaustion seemed to have been called up by these words. It finally surged up and launched a counterattack against him. He didn't refuse Fu Shen's consideration. He removed his outer robe and got into bed. Fu Shen shifted inward, making room for him. The two of them lay shoulder to shoulder in the not especially wide little bed. While it was crowded, the touch of limb to limb was more effective than any consolation. Yan Shouhan, with his arms around Fu Shen's waist, quickly fell into a heavy sleep, as if he had been clubbed over the head. 2 hours later, Du Lang came into the tent to check on Fu Shen's injuries, but he saw the two of them nestled together on the narrow bed, like a pair of mandarin ducks. He found it funny in spite of himself. He had understood that for General Fu, Yan Xiaohan was more useful than any medicine. That's so cute. That's so sweet. Du Lang didn't want to disturb the two of them, so he dropped the curtain and was about to retreat, but it was just then that Fu Shen awoke. Their gazes met. Fu Shen looked down at the sound asleep Yan Xiaohan and made a silent gesture at him, then beckoned him over. Du Lang was confused. Fu Shen propped up half his body, freed one hand, gently rolled up Yan Xiaohan's sleeve, and indicated the bruise on his wrist. He mouthed, "Salve." He hadn't expected him to even notice this. Tu Lang was a little incredulous, but he quickly took his meaning and took a bottle of salve for treating bruises from his medicine chest. Fu Shen took the bottle and silently said to him, "Thank you." Their gazes met lightly in midair. Fu Shen was thanking him for this bottle of salve, and also thanking him for saving his life. Du Lang had heard from Duan Gaohong that Fu Shen had learned of his identity long ago, but hadn't exposed him. Now his face heated involuntarily. He quickly waved a hand and tiptoed out. By the time Yan Xiaohan woke up, it was early morning of the next day. He had slept too deeply and couldn't open his eyes at once. Blearily, he felt someone fiddling with his wrist. The salve was slightly chilly, the hand was warm. It gave him an instant sense of being cherished. Awake. Injured as he was, Fu Shen was a little more alert than him. He had at some point switched to the outer side of the bed and was holding his wrist, applying salves. "You slept for a whole day. Does the wrist still hurt?" If he hadn't mentioned it, Yan Xiaohan wouldn't even have remembered that his wrist was injured. He rolled over and, impervious to reason, bundled Fu Shen entirely into his arms. "No. As long as you're all right, I'm impervious to all injury and poison." Fu Shen's heart ached, but he also wanted to laugh. "Well, aren't you a marvel? When you get up, remember to change the dressing on your neck. Shinan is damp and warm. You can't be careless. Take care that it doesn't get infected." He didn't need to do anything. Just sitting there, he could give you a sense of infinite consolation. The bone-chilling murderous urge in Yan Xiaohan's heart was smoothed by him, sinking beneath the water. He nodded meekly and said, "All right." The two of them lay in bed for a while longer. Only when Fu Shen's medicine had been prepared and was brought in did they get up, wash up, and have breakfast. Fu Shen still needed to recover, and Yan Xiaohan didn't want to make him go to any trouble. He bent down, asked for a kiss, and then went out to see Duan Gaohong and Du Lang. Today was the 8th day of the 7th month. 4 days had passed since Fu Shen had been poisoned. The court's army was in chaos. News of Fu Shen's death had raised clouds up to the sky. The two armies stood opposed at a distance, a battle on the brink of breaking out between them. Events had been too sudden that day. When Fu Shen had spat up blood and fallen, Duan Gaohong had been startled. Before he could work out what was happening, he saw the lieutenant general who had entered the tent, along with Fu Shen, draw his sword and shout, "An ambush! It's a trap!" That cry had shaken heaven and earth. The guards outside the tent had burst in at once in answer. Shinan's people were in the dark, but they couldn't stand there and watch Duan Gaohong get surrounded, so they had also charged into the tent. The two sides had immediately become embroiled in a chaotic fight. Duan Gaohong had only frozen for a moment, then immediately understood that he had been framed. But the circumstances at the time were in fact unaccountable. Duan Gaohong didn't have time to grab that lieutenant general. He ordered his people to pick up Fu Shen and withdraw. On returning to his main camp, he summoned an army doctor to examine him, who confirmed that he showed symptoms of poisoning but couldn't discover what poison it had been. Credit was due to Du Lang for being willing to run the risk of fleeing through the night. He was more reliable than the army doctor in Duan Gaohong's camp. He determined that Fu Shen had been poisoned with a kind of scorpion venom. This kind of scorpion frequently appeared in the deep mountains of Guangnan. The venom was transparent and colorless. It smells sweet and mellow, like wine. So the locals called it the drunken scorpion. When a living scorpion was soaked in wine and its venom forced out, that made a kind of poison called daylight drunkenness. The most distinctive characteristic of this poison was that symptoms wouldn't appear immediately after it was taken. It would only take effect at midday the next day. Since the poison tasted no different from watered-down wine and its effects were delayed, the poisoning victim wouldn't notice it, and the treatment would have nowhere to start. The victim would die as soon as the poison took effect. Xinan had been damp and rainy during that period. Fu Shen's legs sometimes ached. Du Lang had advised that he drink a bit of wine every evening to chase away the damp. It was at this point that the weak spot had emerged, giving Shu Shang's man an opening to exploit. A lucky break amid the misfortune was that Fu Shen had been brought back to Shinan's camp by Duan Gaohong, rather than being snatched back by the court's army. Autumn Night White was especially effective in overcoming snake and scorpion venom. Duan Gaohong might not have had anything else, but he certainly had Autumn Night White. That medicinal plant had once saved Fu Tingshin's life on the grasslands of the northern frontier, and now it had also saved Fu Shen's. By carrying Jing Yuan off, Your Highness, you perfectly substantiated the rumors about the ambush and assassination, Yan Xiaohan said pensively, knocking on the table. But that isn't the worst outcome for us. Duan Gaohong's impression of this nephew's wife was very confused. The night before, Yan Xiaohan had ruthlessly scolded him, so he had thought he was a really fucking difficult character. But when he had heard a few words outside the door last night, he had thought that, compared to that scoundrel Fu Shen, Yan Xiaohan at least had some conscience. What are you planning to do? Yan Xiaohan said. His Majesty respects and fears Jing Yuan. While Shu Shang holds evidence of the Duke of Ying's illicit dealings with Shinan, he doesn't dare to produce it. Instead, he has used this means of secret assassination and tried to put the blame on Your Highness. This shows that he's afraid that once this business gets out, there will be trouble at the northern frontier. They wouldn't be able to stay on top of the situation. To judge from the current circumstances, if Jing Yuan really did die while in your hands, the Beiyuan cavalry and its former subordinates would put it down on Shinan's account. Without Jing Yuan, the northern frontier's monolithic faction will naturally come apart. The court will no longer be coerced by a strong army. It would be killing two birds with one stone. They would have their goal, Yan Xiaohan said. Given His Majesty's temperament, he would treat death as the end of everything. Most likely he wouldn't continue to pursue the Fu family's wrongs. Jing Yuan's heroic name would remain. Duan Gaohong asked, and if he doesn't die? Then his relationship with Shinan would be hard to explain, Yan Xiaohan said. In that case, when they brought out the Duke of Ying's letters again, mostly made-up story would turn into the absolute truth. What would happen to him is hard to say, but his reputation would definitely be destroyed. Duan Gaohong picked up on his implication and said peevishly, So what do you mean? Do you want him to die and have it over with, change his name and go live in the wilderness, while you would be free to look for all the pretty wives and beautiful concubines you could want? Enjoy your wealth and rank in peace, right? Yan Xiaohan didn't take offense. He shook his head and said, Your Highness overestimates me. Never mind living apart from the world. Even if he went to the blue heavens or the yellow springs of the underworld, I would follow him, he said. It isn't Jing Yuan who can't live without me. It's I who can't live without him. My goodness. They have no shame for their husbands. They're just like, it's my man. That's him. When I said till death do I part, I meant death and. Chapter 79. Like, truly, why are they so cute? Yeah. No, they're adorable. Like, they just love each other. Like, truly, completely love each other. Hang on. My hands are really dry. Just a second. Yeah. Chapter 79. On the 8th day of the 7th month of the 4th year of Changxi, according to information sent back from the Shinan front lines, the commander-in-chief of the Western Expeditionary Army, Duke of Jing, Fu Shen, was attacked by the rebel army and unfortunately passed away. On the 10th of the 7th month, the Tianfu Army's representative Yan Xiaohan detoured from Jinling to Shinan and unsuccessfully demanded Fu Shen's remains from the rebel army. Before the troops, Duan Gaohong angrily rebuked Yan Xiaohan, calling him the court sycophant, who had formed a clique for personal benefit, injured a meritorious minister, deceived the ears of the emperor, and caused Fu Shen to die, harboring resentment. The Shinan army took an oath to rid the emperor of his evil minister and punish the sycophant for the sake of Fu Shen's deceased soul. Fu Shen was convalescing in the Shinan camp. After hearing Du Lang retell Prince Duan's speech before the troops, he nearly choked himself laughing. He didn't come up with that himself, did he? If Duan Gaohong had had such skills in calling black white and lying through his teeth, he couldn't have ended up coming to such an impasse with the emperor. Sorry. Who else could it be? Duan Gaohong said cuttingly as he walked in, out of breath. Of course it was that nephew's wife of mine, of the dazzling wits, who told me what to say. Fu Shen didn't see this as a disgrace, but rather as glory. You're overpraising him. It's just a bit of cleverness, nothing to be proud of. Duan Gaohong didn't respond. Being violently rebuked in front of the troops seemed to have embarrassed Yan Xiaohan greatly. When he returned among the army, he strictly ordered all the soldiers not to let this matter leak out. But Fu Shen's death was already a subject of great suspicion. The stricter the order, the more it would make people think that what Duan Gaohong had said was the truth, and the rumors only spread wider and wider. Yeah, I also like that he calls him his nephew's wife. Well, I mean, Fu Shen was the first one to do it, and he's just like, you know what? Screw it. Yeah, sure. Whatever. There were even people who said that the Emperor Changxi, fearing that Fu Shen held too much military power, had sent his trusted aide to assassinate Fu Shen, then struck Duan Gaohong with blame after the fact. Notice of his death and the gossip and rumors reached the capital together, shaking the whole court. The troops at the northern frontier nearly mutinied on the spot. The 4 high generals sent several memorials to the throne in a row, asking the court to perform a thorough investigation. Emperor Changxi couldn't stop the slanderous gossip from spreading throughout the court. Bowing to public pressure, he was forced to reconvene the Yanning Hall Assembly to discuss conferring posthumous honors upon Fu Shen, filling the vacancy he had left behind. On the 13th of the 7th month, when the Yanning Hall Assembly met, Yan Xiaohan returned to the capital with Fu Shen's armor and seal of command and went straight to the palace. All the assembly members were silent. He didn't say a single extraneous sentence, only tossed the armor heavily onto the table. There was a crash, which shook the teacup in front of Xu Sheng to pieces. The armor was dotted with bloodstains that had yet to be washed off. The assembly members of the northern frontier's 4 provinces cried themselves hoarse on the spot. The others either cast down their eyes and became lost in thought or remained silent. Xu Sheng's face was as grim as deep water. Emperor Changxi was apprehensive. Involuntarily, some consolation appeared in his tone. Thank you for your hard work, dear Minister Yan. Sit down. Come, bring tea. The favored eunuch, Yuan Shen, who had pride of place at the emperor's side, hurriedly came forward and poured tea for Yan Xiaohan. Here, Your Honor, he said deferentially. Yan Xiaohan, his face like winter frost, swept him with a look. Yan Shen hunched his shoulders, not daring to breathe loudly, and hurriedly slipped back to the emperor's side with his tail between his legs. The Duke of Jing has served the nation in battle for many years and has performed many meritorious deeds in support of the ruler in governing. Based on his merit, he is qualified to leave his portrait in Qinling Hall. Chen Shi, the new Ministry of Rights, who had replaced the former minister Sheng Duanwen in the assembly, brought up the subject in trepidation. Only Golden Terrace is still undergoing repairs, so this matter will take some time. According to His Majesty's decree, the Ministry of Rights has drawn up some posthumous titles. Ceremony to confer the titles and the funeral are currently being arranged. Also, the Duke of Jing's honors ought to have passed to his descendants, but the two lords are without issue, though I recall that the Duke of Jing also has a brother. That is unsuitable, someone said. The Duke of Jing's brother is the heir of the Duke of Ying Manor. Even if he is to inherit a title, it will be the title of the Duke of Ying. He has no male offspring, and his older brother has no son for him to adopt. That being the case, the Duke of Jing's title ought to be retaken by the court. Yan Xiaohan suddenly spoke up. I heard that little young Master Fu went missing the other day. Has he been found, Lord Shui? Perhaps Shui Shang hadn't been sleeping well lately. He had heavy bags under his eyes, and his eyelids drooped, making his gaze seem inexplicably treacherous. How would I know about the Fu family business? You are asking the wrong person, Lord Yan. Yan Xiaohan said coldly, Lord Shui would know better than me whether I am asking the wrong person. These words were ambiguous, but the hint was very clear. Everyone's ears perked up. They felt that they were about to hear some terrific and shocking inside story. Xu Shang said in displeasure, The situation is chaotic, and affairs are many and complicated. Yet Lord Yan insists on pestering me here. I wonder what your intentions are. Yan Xiaohan said, Do you know that the situation cannot be controlled now? When this happened, I was not in the capital, so I'd like to ask for your guidance. Just who was it who pushed the court into the heart of the wind and waves? Since you have just returned from the front lines, you ought to be aware that the Duke of Jing was killed by the rebel general Duan Gaohong, Xu Shang said, gritting his teeth. As for the traitor calling black white and raving accusations, is Lord Yan actually planning on using this to find fault with me? Look carefully. This is Yanning Hall, not your Feilong Guard. Enough! Everybody be quiet! Emperor Changxi shouted sternly. Fighting like this in public, what a disgrace. Yan Xiaohan and Xu Shang ceased hostilities. Each rose to apologize. Emperor Changxi had an immense headache. Helpless, he said. The deceased are gone. The Duke of Jing's merit persists. His family ought to receive generous consolation and compensation. On the matter of Shinan, we must once again deliberate. Before he could finish, there was a sudden bout of pain in his chest. He couldn't hold himself up and fell headfirst towards his table. Yuan Shen quickly raced forward to support him and burst out, His Majesty! Imperial physicians! Hurry! Summon the Imperial physicians! Yanning Hall instantly descended into chaos. Emperor Changxi's face was ghastly pale, except for two circles of a natural bright red on his cheeks. He leaned against Yuan Shen, unceasingly gasping for breath, one hand pressed tightly against his chest. A bit of pale red froth leaked out beside his lips. After the imperial physician arrived, they immediately applied acupuncture needles to Emperor Changxi as emergency aid, then ordered medicines brought and decocted. There was trampling and turmoil all the way until afternoon, when Emperor Changxi's symptoms lessened slightly. Only then was he removed to Yangshen Hall. His Majesty's illness was a matter of great importance. After all, the assembly members dispersed. Some got together in groups and sent messages. From the look of it, His Majesty had heart disease, which might suddenly become a heart attack at any given moment. The Crown Prince was young, and the Emperor had no other male offspring, but he had several brothers who were still young and vigorous. When it came time for the throne to change hands, there would unavoidably be another crisis. These assembly members belonged to the central administration, but in reality, they each had their own way of managing affairs. Selfish little calculations were clacking away in their minds. For a time, the atmosphere at court became immeasurably peculiar. In the evening, Emperor Changxi woke once. The Empress and all the concubines and consorts were waiting at his bedside, his sickbed. He moved his fingers and let out a faint sound. The imperial physician swarmed up around him. Emperor Changxi, in a daze, let them fiddle around. He feebly beckoned over Yuan Shen, who was standing ready to serve by the bed. Yuan Shen immediately drew near. "Your Majesty?" "What time is it?" "Your Majesty," said Yuan Shen, "it is 7 in the evening. Cancel tomorrow's court session." Emperor Changxi's breaths were weak. Each word and sentence was spoken slowly. "We have encountered a difficulty. A full assembly of Yanning Hall must be convened. Where is Yan Xiaohan?" "Your Majesty," Yuan Shen said cautiously, "Lord Yan has returned home to observe mourning." Emperor Changxi found it hard to breathe for a time. An imperial physician quickly said, "You must not become agitated, Your Majesty." "Tell him to come back." Emperor Changxi closed his eyes wearily. "It's a time of emergency. There's no need to stand on ceremony. Have him preside over the Yanning Hall assembly." At this point, he recalled something and glanced down at Empress Fu, who was silent, her head hanging down. She was dressed in mourning garb, without any jewelry or hair ornaments. He sighed softly and instructed, "There is no need to attend at the sickbed. Yuan Shen will remain to provide service. Everyone else withdraw." There was sorrow on Fu Ling's brow. She was spare and delicate. She daintily prostrated herself before the imperial bed like a white flower, dimly seen through the rain and mist, quietly said, "I will take my leave." That night, Yan Xiaohan received a message from a court eunuch ordering him not to shut himself up to observe mourning, but to return to court to preside over the Yanning Hall assembly. In spite of himself, he sneered. "That's what they call no sooner gone than forgotten. Funeral hasn't even been held, and already he thinks nothing of him." Yuan Shen's expression didn't alter. He minded his own business, pretending that he hadn't heard a thing. "Return. I understand. It's only a few months. I can wait." From then on, there was no improvement in Emperor Changxi's condition, and the planned trip to Jiangnan in the 9th month could not be carried out. When winter began, his condition became graver and graver by the day. At first, Emperor Changxi could still occasionally put in an appearance at court. After the 10th month, he was entirely confined to his bed. The imperial physicians in the palace held their tongues. They could only glad tidings, not ill ones. They told only glad tidings, not ill ones. Despite this, some well-connected people still learned from various indirect sources that the emperor was unlikely to survive, began to prepare in secret. On the 5th day of the 11th month of the 4th year of Changxi, the first snow since the start of winter fell on the capital. Late at night, the imperial city was all somber whiteness. A man of average height, wrapped in a cloak and wearing a hood, holding a storm lantern, knocked on the side door of Yan Manor and said quietly to the butler, who had come to open the door, "Message from eunuch Yuan. Hurry and ask your master to go to the palace at once." Oh, another typo. Not long after, a small carriage stopped outside the Shangshuan gate. A man in white mourning garb got out of the carriage. Yuan Shen had been waiting inside and quickly called a young eunuch over to hold an umbrella for him. He couldn't resist chattering on. "Your Honor, you're finally here. Quick, if you come any later, we won't be able to stop." "What are you panicking about?" Snowflake fluttered and fell on his eyelashes and turned into a small water droplet. Yan Xiaohan walked evenly towards the palace and casually said, "Doesn't matter who kills him. It's bound to happen sooner or later." Inside Yangshin Hall, the candlelight flickered. Emperor Chengxi had been tormented for several months and was now so thin he was only a handful of bones. Lying in bed, his body hardly raised the covers lying over him. His face was as white as paper, but his lips were blackened. His breathing was almost inaudible. His eyes were deeply sunken in. Not a trace remained of his former genteel and refined, handsome appearance. Fu Ling was wiping his face with a damp towel, perfectly meticulous. There was no one in the large hall, only flickering candlelight, which cast her gaunt shadow against the bed curtains, twisted and slanted. Looked at dimly, it was like a creeper that had climbed out of the gloom. Her eyes lingered on Emperor Chengxi's forehead and nose, counting his shallow breaths, her fingers constantly tightening on the towel, as if keeping suppressed some dangerous thought trying to get out. He seemed ready to die at any moment, his throat so fragile that it would snap as soon as it was clutched. Fu Ling's wrist trembled. She seemed almost unable to keep hold of that towel. But obscurely, there was some invisible cord guiding her hand, making her fearful, but persistently bringing that damp towel to Emperor Chengxi's nose and mouth. This man had once been her support and her resting place in this life, but it was also he who had personally forfeited many years of affection between husband and wife, even sent her only older brother to his death. For the imperial family, there were no fathers and sons, no brothers, and naturally, there were also no husbands and wives. Crack! The door opened wide, and a northerly wind blew into the warm hall. Fu Ling's expression froze. She yanked her hand back as if scalded and quickly dropped the towel into a pail of water. She stood and sternly said, "Who is outside?" Guess what? We're on our last chapter of the main story. Chapter 80. Do not be afraid, your ladyship. Yan Xiaohan walked through the door and bowed to her. He had Yuan Shen close the door, then sat before the imperial bed and bent his head to inspect Emperor Chengxi's condition. Fu Ling hardly recognized Yan Xiaohan. Her impressions of this person were very complicated. She knew that he had once helped her, but she also hated him bitterly for sullying her brother. On top of that, she currently had a guilty conscience. Therefore, when she spoke, her tone was slightly harsh and alarmed. What did you come here for? I came to help you, Yan Xiaohan said calmly. You are the crown prince's mother. It would be better if you weren't tainted by regicide. Fu Ling said in astonishment. You? Has your ladyship forgotten? You have my people at your side. Yan Xiaohan raised the lid of the beef-shaped incense burner and sprinkled in a handful of new incense. Then he evenly explained, "Even if you do nothing, His Majesty's end is still near at hand. When it comes to a matter that will have one's name go down in history as a byword for infamy, just allow me to do it. Do not dirty your hands." In his tone and manner as he spoke was a dependability that made one involuntarily believe him. Fu Ling stared blankly at the mourning garb he wore, incredulity and revelation simultaneously surging up in her heart. She whispered, "His Majesty's illness was engineered by you? Was it for him?" The chilly smell of the incense spread as the beast's mouth spat smoke, diluting the decaying smell of medicines and the warm incense fragrance in the room. It seemed as if they had instantly been transported into a world of ice and snow. On the bed, Emperor Changshi's limbs began to convulse. His breathing became rapid. Phlegmy gasps came from his throat. It was for him, though it wasn't entirely because of this incident, Yan Xiaohan said with a smile. "Has your ladyship noticed that, since returning to the capital, His Majesty has had no more offspring?" Since the affair of pure consort Shui, Yan Xiaohan had been aware that Emperor Changxi was an unreliable, fickle man. In his hands, the positions of the Empress and the Crown Prince were in imminent danger. So after Emperor Changxi had returned to the capital, he had begun secretly ordering Yuan Shen to put a drug in the emperor's tea. Drinking tea was a prevailing custom among the people of the times. Emperor Changxi in particular liked tea. It was precisely because of his skills at making tea that Yuan Shen had ended up in the emperor's good graces. What Yan Xiaohan had given him was an herbal medicine extremely similar in form to tea, with a scent that was also similar. It was toxic and damaged the ability to have offspring. Emperor Changxi had been drinking this no children tea for years, and indeed he had not planted a single dragon seed. That was a very interesting sentence. This drug has the effect of strengthening the heart. In combination with the tulip incense Yan Xiaohan had just lit, could easily make a person exhibit symptoms similar to heart disease. The imperial physicians couldn't tell that he had been poisoned and continued to give Emperor Changxi medicines that strengthened the heart. It was like piling frost on top of snow, pouring oil on fire. Over time, his illness had become increasingly severe with treatment, and at this point, he was beyond saving. He was only suffering through his remaining days. Yan Xiaohan had planned to move slowly, wait until the crown prince was a little older to let Emperor Changxi suffer heart disease and die. But he had underestimated Xu Shang and Emperor Changxi's ambitions, and he certainly hadn't expected Fu Ya to jump in and thrust his oar in, making the situation immediately irretrievable. Luckily, Fu Shen was all right. While his plan had to be moved up, it had still succeeded. "The night is still long. I'll keep watch here. Your ladyship should rest. There'll be things to do tomorrow." Yan Xiaohan turned his head and said to the silent eunuch by the door, "What the heck? Sorry, it felt like there was a bug crawling on my foot. Ugh, that was gross. Ugh. Yuan Shen, take the Empress to a side chamber." It was still snowing. The darkest part of night had come. Soon, day would be breaking, the snow clearing, and the sky brightening. Fu Ling was uncompromisingly invited into a side chamber. She lay in bed with her clothes on, hundreds of thousands of thoughts tumbling in her mind into a tangled skein that couldn't be unknotted. Only near dawn did she fall into a muddled sleep. In a daze, the sounds of a somber bell seemed to come from the distance. She missed a step in her dreams. Her heart lurched, and she suddenly woke up. There was silence all around. It was still gloomy outside. Fu Ling sat up in bed, her breathing flurried, feeling her heart still pounding uncontrollably. Just then, someone gently knocked on the door. Yuan Shen's voice came through the door. "My lady, are you awake? Lord Yan has dispatched me to ask whether you wish to see His Majesty one last time." It was as if Fu Ling had been struck dead by lightning. Without forewarning, 2 tears rolled from her eyes. Her throat stung. Holding back sobs, she said, "Wait a moment, eunuch. I'm coming." When Fu Ling had cleaned herself up and reached the main hall, Emperor Chengxi was already in a stupor. There were many people around the imperial bed. Eunuchs, court historians, imperial physicians. Only Yan Xiaohan was standing aside at a distance, his expression bland, as if this had nothing to do with him. At this critical moment, he was lost in thought, like an outsider. After everyone had bowed, they made their way. Fu Ling knelt beside the imperial bed. Tearfully, she called, "Your Majesty." Emperor Chengxi's eyelids twitched faintly, as if reacting to her voice, but he didn't open his eyes. Fu Ling clutched his emaciated hand and sobbed, said, "Do not worry, Your Majesty. I will be sure to teach Hui Er well and not disappoint Your Highness's ardent hopes." Emperor Chengxi's fingers twitched a few more times in her hand. His breathing was as weak as a dying candle in the wind. It was said that before death, everyone would have a moment of recovered glory. But while the imperial physicians waited with bated breath, Emperor Chengxi ultimately did not wake again, nor at the gazes of the crowd his breathing slowly came to a stop. "May you restrain your grief, your ladyship." After a while, Yan Xiaohan stepped forward and said softly behind Fu Ling, "His Majesty has passed." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in Yangshin Hall knelt in unison. Yan Xiaohan saw Fu Ling still in a daze and had to prompt her. "Your ladyship?" Fu Ling was like a wooden dummy. She blinked ladenly, shaking the very last teardrops from the corner of her eye. She extended a hand toward Yuan Shen at her side. Yuan Shen quickly gave her his arm. Yan Xiaohan retreated, swept aside his robe, and knelt. "His Majesty has passed." Fu Ling faced the spacious hall, her red lips slightly parted, her voice hoarse and trembling. There was a sob in her words, but she grit her teeth and persevered in saying her piece. "Send messengers to notify the public, the officials, the princes, the concubines immediately. Shut the palace gates and the city gates. Impose martial law throughout the city. Ask the..." Before the words "new master" could be spoken, a loud cry suddenly came from outside. "His Majesty has passed! Why was I not summoned to the palace to hear his posthumous edict?" Someone must have leaked the information. Outside Yangshin Hall, with Shu Shang in the lead, dozens of assembly members congregated at the foot of the steps. There was a place as well for Emperor Chengxi's brother by another mother, Prince Shao. Leaning on Yuan Shen's arm, Fu Ling walked to the front of the hall, her gaze coldly sweeping over one face after another, young or old. Sternly, she said, "The imperial physicians will bear witness that His Majesty did not wake from his stupor. There was no posthumous edict." "Perhaps there was," Shu Shang said meaningfully, "but your ladyship does not know of it." Fu Ling said, "My son was invested with the rank of crown prince by the emperor himself. He is the heir apparent. Regardless of whether there was a posthumous edict, he is still the new master of the empire. What objection does Lord Yue have?" Yue Shang gave a cold laugh and opened a wooden box he was carrying. From it he removed a bright yellow edict yellow imperial edict and raised it high. This is a posthumous edict written in His Majesty's own hand, which he entrusted to me when his illness became grave, to be proclaimed throughout the empire upon his demise. There was a moment of silence outside the hall, followed by an explosion. The Empress said that there was no posthumous edict, and a favored minister said the posthumous edict was in his hands. What did this mean? It means that it was likely that the successor named in the posthumous edict in Xu Shang's hands wasn't the crown prince. Yan Xiaohan's eyes narrowed slightly. His hand, concealed by his sleeve, gripped a knife. He began to give earnest consideration to how he could wrap things up afterward if he stabbed Xu Shang now. That Xu Shang dared to bring forth the imperial edict, regardless of whether it was real or fake, made it clear that the successor to the throne he had set his heart on was not the crown prince, but Prince Shou, hidden among the crowd. But given Emperor Chengxi's disposition, would he really have cast aside his own son in favor of handing over the nation to a half-brother he wasn't familiar with? Before he could reach a conclusion, urgent hoofbeats suddenly sounded in the distance. 2 black steeds trode over the snow, speeding from outside the palace. A voice, long unheard from afar, falling upon everyone's ears like a thunderclap. Not thunderclap. The retired emperor's decree has come. Ministers, attend to the decree. Yan Xiaohan turned his head in astonishment. Wild wind struck him in the face. At the end of the night and the snowstorm, a tall and upright figure gradually came clear in his vision, along with the pale light of dawn in the east. A red martial robe, a black marten coat, a sword at his waist, dashing and spirited, like a martial god descended to earth, the star of command incarnate. Fu Shen! General! A haze of snow splashed. The Duke of Jing, Fu Shen, reined in his horse before the hall and came to a halt. He greeted the crowd from on high. Gentlemen, it's been a long time since we met. Then he focused his greeting on Xu Shang. Lord Xu, I hope you have been well. On seeing the ghost, Xu Shang felt as if a pail of ice water had been poured over his head. An enormous chill and panic seized his heart. His eyes nearly burst from their sockets. His countenance was hideous, half afraid, half a cornered beast ready to fight. With difficulty, he squeezed out from between his teeth. It's you. Heaven has not granted your desires. I did not die. I am sorry. With a smile, Fu Shen said, Lord Shui becomes ever more impressive. After this long separation, I look upon you with new eyes. Before you restrained yourself to poisoning. I did not think that now you would even falsify an imperial edict. Slander and calumny, Xu Shang shot out like gunfire. You colluded in secret with Duan Gaohong with the intention of rebelling. Your plot was discovered by His Majesty, causing him to order your death. The Fu family has committed the great crime of treason, and the Empress is your close kin. It is because of this that His Majesty wrote this posthumous edict in his own hand and entrusted it to me, intending to pass on his throne to Prince Shao. You traitor, how dare you show yourself here to upset this situation? Fu Shen was not angered. He only clicked his tongue and said, Listen, don't you feel guilty saying such a thing, Lord Shui? If I had truly plotted rebellion, he said with emphasis, gaze sweeping over the ministers outside Yangshin Hall with a false smile, would you be standing here today, raising a hue and cry against me? Never mind the capital. You would have died stranded in Jinling. The Western Expeditionary Army's Lieutenant General Li Xiaodong had made a full confession. You ordered him to poison me during my peace talks with Shinan and to frame Duan Gaohong. I have brought him before the Imperial Court of Justice for you. The handprint on his confession is still fresh. Lord Shui, why don't you run along with that imperial degree and go keep him company? Word after word shook the earth and the heavens. Fu Shen had swiftly spilled the whole truth. The assembly members from the northern frontier were the first to react. They were mad enough to burst their lungs. Gloweringly, they said, "Old oaf, you dare to dupe your sovereign in this way?" Yan Xiaohan made a gesture at the imperial guards not far away. Xu Sheng cried out sternly, "I am still an appointed official of the court. Without cause or evidence, who dares to arrest me?" "I dare," Fu Shen said coldly. "Where are the imperial guards?" Not for nothing was he a commander-in-chief who regularly commanded troops. This sentence was dignified and awesome, with a clang as metal striking metal. To either side, imperial guards responded in unison, voices soaring up to the clouds. "Hear! All officers and men attend. Arrest the traitor who sought to rebel and throw court discipline into chaos, and escort him to be locked up in the imperial prison to await trial." There was murder in Fu Shen's voice. Grimly, he said, "I have been in the army for a decade. My sword has drunk the blood of countless men. Do you think it cannot carry out a punishment for usurpation upon a traitor like you?" The imperial guards were their people to begin with. Hearing these words, they were at once like tigers and wolves released from a cage. They swarmed forward to hold Xu Sheng down and bind him, then dragged him away. From Xu Sheng standing forth to his capture, there had been several reverses, and it had all happened in a flash. It was thanks to Fu Shen's uncompromising, direct methods that he had, in a single brief stroke, cut through and eradicated this palace coup. The average person was unlikely to experience such a scene even once in their whole lifetime. The ministers were all struck dumb with astonishment. For a long time, they couldn't recover their senses. No one had ever expected that such a bizarre shift could take place. But carefully considering it, in their hearts they felt a sense of matters coming to rest in spite of themselves. The situation was settled. Though the retired emperor's decree had yet to be read, there was no suspense as to the outcome. Fu Shen had returned. Throughout the empire, who could now rise above the crown prince? Yan Xiaohan composedly put away his knife and walked up to Fu Shen's horse. He offered his hand up, and in the calm tone of ordinary spouses talking about domestic trivialities, he asked, "Didn't I tell you to stay put and look after your health? Why did you sneak back?" This time, General Fu finally stopped playing dumb. Without any attempt at concealment, he jumped from the saddle, holding his hand, and said, "Was I supposed to let that old thief Xu Sheng bully my widowed little sister and her child?" He turned his head to give Fu Ling a look. At the top of the steps, the Empress's tears instantly became unstoppable. Fu Shen sighed and gravely said, "Restrain your grief." There was still a bright yellow imperial decree in his hands, but Yan Xiaohan held on, unwilling to let go. Fu Shen glanced down and with a quiet, feeling sigh, said, "Listen, my wife, your grip is a little too strong." Yan Xiaohan said nothing. Fu Shen laughed and didn't struggle free. He raised his hand and tossed the imperial decree to a eunuch who had come with him. Pithily, he said, "Read it." Hearing news of Emperor Chengxi's grave illness, Fu Shen had worried that Yan Xiaohan would be unable to handle it alone, so without him knowing, he had snuck away from Xinan to hurry back to the capital. The Beiyuan army had its own connections to the palace. He had entered the palace with the aid of the eunuch Chang Fengjun. On the way, he had heard that news had leaked out and Xu Sheng and the others were headed for the palace. Just in case, he had gone out of his way to see the retired emperor and request a decree. He hadn't expected this ultimately to turn into such a farcical performance. By the grace of heaven, the retired emperor decrees, we restore to ourselves the authority of emperor. Emperor Yuntai had abdicated the throne due to irresistible pressure. If it had come down to it, his hand and eyes were countless times stronger than Emperor Chengxi's. Fushen preferred to rely on him rather than trust an idiot like Emperor Chengxi. According to the retired emperor's edict, Sun Hui, son of the empress, would inherit the throne. But the new master was young, so affairs of state would continue to be resolved by the Yanning Hall Assembly, with the Empress Dowager to preside from behind a screen. In addition, 5 ministers would aid in rule. The Tianfu Army's representative, Yan Xiaohan, the Duke of Jing, Fu Shen, Dongji Hall's official Gu Shanlue, Guanhai Hall's official Li Huayi, and Jiangning Pavilion's official Xiao Tong. When the decree had been read, the only 2 people on the scene who were holding hands, as if soaring upon clouds and riding the mist, had suddenly been raised to the highest position of authority in the empire. Those who knew the inside story could not avoid being surprised. Emperor Yuntai had once exercised the dirtiest tactics against Fu Shen, wanting nothing better than to kill him. But on the brink of a new age, he seemed to have set aside all misgivings and firmly offered up the greatest authority to Fu Shen with both hands. An emperor's heart was a needle in the sea. What enlightenment had come to him was perhaps known only to Emperor Yuntai himself. Has it been read? My turn now. Fu Shen turned to Yan Xiaohan. There was a subtle smile at the corners of his mouth. Raising his voice slightly, he said, Oral instructions from the retired emperor. Yan Xiaohan, attend. Yan Xiaohan was slightly surprised. He let go of his hand and took a step backward, swept aside his robes, and knelt. Fu Shen said, If the new master can be aided, do your utmost as his trusted aid. If he is incompetent, you may take his place. There was dead silence in the snow. Everyone, apart from Fu Shen, including Yan Xiaohan and the Empress, were all poleaxed. Yan Xiaohan? Why Yan Xiaohan? His ears were full of the rush of clamoring blood. These words were like a club over the head, striking Yan Xiaohan so hard he lost all sense of time. It was as if he had been thrown into the midst of a vast field of snow. He felt no happiness. There was only out-and-out bewilderment. What did this mean? He raised his eyes in a daze to look at Fu Shen. Their gazes met in midair. The corner of Fu Shen's eyes curved slyly. Then there was a sudden darkness before Yan Xiaohan's eyes as a thick, dark shadow swept over his head, carrying Fu Shen's body heat and a trace of medicinal odor, and solidly settled over his shoulders. Fu Shen had removed his marten coat and draped it over him. Yan Xiaohan was dressed all in plain mourning garb, almost invisible as he knelt in the snow. But when he was enveloped in this pitch-black marten coat, the red walls and yellow roof tiles, the gray bricks and white snow, the 2 men in the snow, one kneeling and one standing. For some reason, the whole scene suddenly turned vivid and detailed. Fu Shen bowed slightly and reached out a hand for him. Softly, he prompted him. Lord Yan, will you obey the decree? His movement seemed to have some ritual significance. The assembly members of the northern border were the first to kneel. Closely following them, the dozen or so assembly members from the other places also knelt in unison. We solemnly obey the retired emperor's edict. Yan Xiaohan's attention was focused on Fu Shen, who was looking back at him. I solemnly obey the imperial edict. As proper, I will spare no effort in carrying it out and be worthy of the responsibility given to me. Dawn had passed and the day was here. Wind and snow had ended. The sun rose slowly from the distant horizon. Clear light shone upon the thin coating of snow on the glazed roof tiles, glistening brightly, almost splendid enough to dazzle. But none of it surpassed the figure standing before him with his back to the light. It seemed as if his slightest movement could spread gentle waves of light as far as the eye could see. Sorrow and joy, and parting and reunion, life and death, and calamity and trial, wild laughter and tearful songs, 12 years gone by like the course of a long river. All of it flowed gently past in the instant their eyes met. In that look was his vast territory, the safety of his home and nation. And there was also his promise to grow old together, unchangingly faithful till death. The end. So that's the end of the main storyline. And so next Tuesday we will do the extras, but kind of an interesting way to end it. Not gonna lie. I was not expecting the Emperor to make Yan Shouhan. Yeah. Make him take the place of Emperor. That's crazy. Yeah, quite the ending. I agree, Momar's Rover. I am not sure how spicy the extras will get, but we will figure that out next week. I guess I'll do a spice warning now. It might get spicy next week. I will possibly edit what I have to say, depending. But we'll see. This was a lot of fun, and I'm really excited we came to the ending, and I liked it. It kind of went by really quickly, kind of like, oh, it's over. Okay. But it's kind of tied up most of the edges. Like, I think the only thing that I'm still a little iffy on, like, they never really addressed the white white knight dew powder or whatever. That's really like the only thing I'm just like, so it just ravaged the rest of the area, like we never came back to that. Like, clearly it's still a thing because they used it to cure the venom, but yeah, no, I'm pretty happy with this. I hope you guys are too. Thank you for sticking with me. I know if a native speaker or someone who's fluent, my butchering of the names probably is killing them, but we do our best. But yeah, thank you for joining me. I am super excited to read the extras with you all on Tuesday and to show you my new tattoo on Tuesday because I'll be getting it Monday. But until then, I wish you all a lovely rest of your evening and a very happy weekend. And anyone who's watching later, like, I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you Tuesday. Good night.